The Instructor podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor podcast, Green Room Edition. This is a show where we cover all the latest news and hot topics from our little driving instructor world. As always, I am your childlike host, Terry Cook. I'm delighted to be here, but you're delighted. It's not just me, because I'm joined by the adults in the room, the Mr. Chris Benstead. How are we doing, Chris?
I'm good. I'm going to try not to cough through this. I've got the cough that everybody seems to be having at the moment, but I'll do my best, as always.
How often do you get referred to as the adult or the grown-up in the room?
Never. Never in my life have I been referred to as the adult in the room, except where there's slight concern into people's eyes. So,
The Instructor podcast, the gift that keeps on giving. Yes, as we said, this is the show that covers all latest news. And do you know what? I think for the first time in a long time, there's some proper meaty news type events to get us teeth into. But we also did get a really good message from one of my premium members, Dave Legg, who were talking about stomach care and in particular idea of inning students. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But as we do on this show, for all 49 episodes that we have so far done, we will talk about the news first. So if you don't want to hear the news, fast forward to the next bit. But the most important news, I would say, as I've just kind of alluded to, is this is a 49th episode. So what does that mean, Chris?
the next one's 50th.
Yes, the next one's the 50th. That's quite a big special episode, and well done for that quick maths you've just done. We do have something special lined up next time. We're going long, which for us is like quite a while, I can imagine. And we've got some very special guests coming along, some of which know about it and some of which haven't been told yet. So we'll see what happens on the day. You're looking forward to the 50th, Chris? 50 episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the disappointment from the people that think you're going to invite them and now you don't from that setup. So
I've had that scenario with another thing I do recently, but we'll come back to that. But yeah, the actual news, not just me promoting myself, the actual news, we've had some. I want to start off with one that I was only really made aware of today, if I'm being honest with you. It occurred a few days ago. And I think it's relevant for us to mention, maybe not a huge discussion, but the sale of Total Drive. There'll be some people watching and listening that use Total Drive, and it's been sold for the princely sum of £7.5 million. 3.5 initially, and going up according to bonuses, much like footballer sales. But yeah, £7.5 million. That's not bad, is it, Chris?
no, I wish I'd been nicer to Tom and the team, to be honest.
Give them more support. We could have got a cut.
Yeah, but I think it's going to be interesting. Anything like that's interesting. With all of these things, we've seen it before. It makes it or it breaks it. Sometimes, things don't go the way that you expect. Yeah, let's watch. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. And the history of the industry with big investors and big purchases has not been good. Thinking of the likes of My Drive, the MI Drive lot that had holiday extras behind it initially, and fair old amount of money was ploughed into that one. And just as it started to get somewhere, it failed to get anywhere. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing what that kind of investment and support does.
The guys behind it, some of Ross are staying on for at least a little while. So, all being well, it should only get better for them, hopefully. But I can remember a little while ago, I think it was on what was at the time, I can't remember what it used to be called, but the Current Kid podcast, or whatever it used to be called. What did it used to be called? Do you remember?
No.
Anyway, Mick Knowles' podcast, the original version, I'm sure they were on there, and I'll be paraphrasing massively, talking about that one of their desires was to make a lot of money and sell the business. So, and again, I'm paraphrasing massively, but, they've achieved their goal, so well done.
That's something that I think was pointed out to me by, a proper business person, that there's two reasons for having a business. One is to grow it and sell it. The other one is to grow it so it pays for you to sit around and do nothing. And I think that it's not very common in our industry where it's that, because so often we are the business. And if we stop, the business stops, which to some people is not a proper business. That, it's not a going concern if you're not there, and you want something that will be. So I think that's a little bit alien sometimes. So it'll be interesting to see people's response to it.
I think you can look at it from the flip side, though. So you look at what you do with the DITC, or look at the Instructor podcast, or even something like My Drive Time, for example. They are businesses, but they're not necessarily run for that reason. It's like we want to make the industry better in this way, And the way we do that is to do this thing, which then happens to be a business almost. And then if we make money from it, I suppose need to make money from it, otherwise we won't be able to do it. Whereas there'll be other people that have a better business acumen potentially and go, I want to make money. How can I make money? This looks like a good thing. I'm not saying either of those ways are better than the other. When I see 7.5 million being branded about, it does make me think maybe that way is better potentially because, I don't think I would sell the Instructor podcast for 7.5 million. I think I'll struggle for £7.50.
I'll give you the £7.50. Yeah. You're not struggling for it.
I'll let you host the rest of the show. Off you go. No, but, well done to Total Drive. And did podcast, there you go. Gary Thomas is watching along with us today, one of the people. Did podcast drive the instructor development. There we go. Thank you. But yes, next bit of news. We were recently at the convention. Both you and I there, and I think all but one of the current people watching us were there as well. I've shared my thoughts on this previously, but this was your first time attending, Chris. So what were your thoughts on the convention?
Yeah, you did a good job of selling it to me, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker. No, I enjoyed it. I don't like big groups of people. That's my problem. So for me, probably I wouldn't go to the gala thing the night before again because I just found it stressful because of the big groups of people. It was great, and there were some well-deserved awards, and it was nice to see. But I think it added to things for me. The actual day of the conference, I thought was a really nice. Convention was a really well organised day. There was a good variety of trade stands because I think sometimes you need that balance. You want to go along and hear people and everything else, but you also want to pick up some freebies as much as anything. And there was some really informed speakers. It was a nice mix. There wasn't too much in the way of standards check or part 3 or what have you that gets a bit overloaded sometimes. Yeah, I thought it was a really nice mix, and I enjoyed it. And I met some lovely people that I didn't know, and I always think that's nice. It's lovely to see the ones that I do know, and people have got very good at coming up and giving me their name because they know that I can never remember. So yeah, but it was I met some PDIs that I'd never met before, and hopefully they'll be listening because I gave them details.
I'm a bit like you. I don't like those big crowds, but I don't think I quite feel. I don't know why. I feel it at the expo, but I don't feel it at the convention. I think it's because I'm in my own little bubble of people. And actually, it's one thing that not annoyed me. One thing I didn't like was that I got split up from you. We weren't able to sit together. I was quite looking forward to playing footsie or whatever, but it was. But I did get to spend a bit of time, which is nice. We had breakfast together, which is always good. Yeah. In the restaurant, just to clarify. But no, I agree.
They didn't do breakfast in bed there. That was the
no. Well, we didn't ask, but big shout out, as you kind of touched on it, but Richard Storrs, Gina, Rachel Butler, Richard Borges, these guys, I think whether you agree with everything or not is on what you put that aside. I think we can all agree they put on an excellent event, and I think it runs so smoothly most of the time when they do this stuff. It's really, really quality. The thing I would mention as well, I know you said there wasn't much standards check stuff on the presentation side, but I did mention this before the event, I think on one of these episodes. It was a bit too much driving instructor, black and white stuff for me. It didn't feel that quite level of variety for me that I like. I do like it mixed up a little bit, and I think by the time we got to, I don't know, lunchtime or just after lunch, I was a bit driving instructed out. But yes. It was good. Maybe the motivational speak could have been done with being at lunchtime rather than at the end to motivate us for the rest of the day. What did you think of the motivational speaker?
He was all right. I wouldn't have argued with him. He was massive. I think he's a lovely guy, and I'm sure everybody. No, it's huge. He was what's his name? James. So off of SAS, Who Dares Win, and yeah, I thought it was interesting. I have massive respect for what he's achieved. I felt there were more relevant people potentially that you could have had that would have motivated. If we're going to be what are we being motivated to? And it was being motivated to do something.
With home afterwards, I think.
it didn't matter what it was. It was just being motivated. And I just felt maybe there could be more of an inspiring purpose. There's so many people out there that can do that. But that's not knocking him. I thought he did a decent job. And I have massive admiration for anyone that can run. I don't care how far, because I'm not a runner.
When Richard Stars introduced me to him, gave me a high five, and I had to jump up to reach his hand. It was like you have to accommodate someone's height, I think, when they're not quite as tall as you on the high fives. But no, I think overall, I love these events. I love the conventions. I think I prefer it to the expo, and I think part of it is because you've got this group of people that have, I shouldn't say everyone, almost everyone there really wants to be there, and they're paid to be fair, a fair but good chunk of money to be there.
Yeah.
So I think there's a slightly different atmosphere to perhaps the expo, when there are some people that come along that a bit more, let's use the word, skeptical. And I think there's less of that at the convention. It's a bit more enthusiasm, which was nice. Anything else you want to touch on with that, Chris?
No, I think I would like to take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone who organised it, because I did enjoy it, and I came back without my brain aching too much. And I achieved that, I think, partly by posting stuff on Facebook as the day went on. I kind of managed to move on each time. That's my new strategy. So expect more when I go to events of me just abusing Facebook and Instagram. But it was a good day. So I appreciate everybody who put work in, because a lot of them, we won't even know they were involved. We won't hear anything about it, and they made everyone else look good. So yeah. My moment of the whole event, which is a tiny little thing, but was when Kev ad-libbed, because he was struggling with the microphone, and he'd been trying to tell people to, sleuth their way through driving lesson anxiety, of try and find out what's at the cause of it and everything else. And he just was struggling with the microphone and went, it's a bit like I'm doing here, if I move a little bit left or a little bit right. And it was a quality trainer, Kev Field, a quality trainer, just going with the flow, and he deserved the round of applause.
My moment of the event was like a collection of things, starting off by Rachel Butler telling me she was going to sit me next to her so that I won't be picked on by the entertainer, and then proceeding to be picked on by the entertainer for about 45 minutes.
You were the star of that show. I thought it was hysterical.
I didn't, oddly. On a complete unrelated note, on a completely unrelated question, do you agree with the principle that someone learns to become a driving instructor should learn how to deliver lessons and then qualify, and then learn how to deliver client-centered lessons, and then learn the GD matrix? Or do you think that all that could be bumped together in the beginning?
The second one. The second one. I think you need to know what all of the ingredients are, even if you don't use them from the beginning. I think that's the thing. It's, you need to know it's there and it exists, because otherwise you don't leave room in your process for it, and it doesn't work. So, I think we were chatting about this at the event, weren't we? That the PDIs that I'm seeing coming through now are way better educated than I ever was when I joined the industry, and the stuff that was delivered in my training, partly not just through the people who are doing their training, they're going out and finding it themselves. And the fact that they can do that is an absolute credit to a lot of people in the industry that have stepped up, and it's taken time to do so. And, all of those things are available. I think there's some ADIs that need to feel a little bit threatened, because I think there's a lot going on. I think it's really interesting. So just seeing that shift of focus, and I don't think we can discredit people's understanding just because they haven't been doing the job for very long.
I agree. I think that some of the BDIs coming through now are better than I was. Probably some are better than I am now. I reckon so there's some BDIs out there that are better than some trainers, but, whatever. But let's move on, because there has been some DVSA news, which has been around test cancellations. So they've changed the period, the time that you can move a test from 3 working days after 10 working days, Chris, how big of an impact is this going to have on the driving test waiting list?
I didn't get it at all. I like to think that given a little bit of time to think about it, I'll figure it out. I was really struggling. So I did the sensible thing. I collared Nick Taylor, the registrar at the convention, desperate to call it a conference, at the convention, and he said, it's not my department, I don't know. However, he did try and answer it a little bit for me. He did a little bit of, party line stuff. I think from a driving instructor's perspective, it's not a benefit to us at all. With the exception of if it does something to improve waiting list times and such, then okay, we'll see the benefit from that. But actually, we're potentially going to suffer for it, depending on the model of your business. Intensives, I think it will go one way or the other, because arguably they're going to have twice as much short notice stuff to pick from that they potentially are happy to just deliver depending on the model of intensive. There's lots of different ways of doing it, but some of them will happily just go, great, I've got a test for the end of it. So that might be an asset to them. But I think there's going to be a lot of people struggling because they've got less time to make that final decision, and we're going to have the phones ringing off the hook because there's twice as much availability of short notice for people to be grabbing when they haven't got an instructor, and then phoning everybody trying to get someone who's willing to take them. So I think that's going to be going on. Nick's point was that it's about the wasted person hours at the DVSA, where examiners are left twiddling their thumbs because someone doesn't turn up, or that it's a short notice test, and we assume that they haven't been able to get an instructor for it. Now, arguably, the 10-day thing could increase that because there's more that can't be cancelled. So I still don't quite get it. I, as we've said numerous times, we have learnt that when the DVSA do something, actually they do think about stuff. There is good thought behind it, and they see it from that perspective. We might not agree, but there's a logic to it. I'm yet to quite understand what that is. I still am not quite there. So anyone who knows, if you've actually figured it out, please let me know. It'll be interesting to have a chat about this on episode 50 or 51 and see what happens then. The most confusion that I've had, which I will very quickly access on my phone so I get it right, was when our local test centre put up an update about the changes, and it was the dates, the way that it was working, and I read it numerous times and then questioned it, which is that the 10 full working days is coming in, that it will be from the 8th of April, but the tests before the 12th aren't affected. And that really hurt my head. So I asked test centre manager, who's awesome. I won't say which one it is. She knows who she is. She's awesome. Really helpful. And her reply was, yes, exactly that, as the current deadline would be the 8th of April, but the new deadline is now the 31st of March. I think I'm getting old. I'm really struggling to keep up. So just be careful in that initial window. Get them to double check. Just do your homework, because I'm confused.
It's it when I agree with 100% of what you say. I like it when there's 90 and something I can pick out, but no, I fully agree. I am going to put the caveat on it, and I'm sure you agree with this, actually, that I really, really hope that we're wrong. I really, really hope that them doing this has a positive impact, and not a positive impact like a tiny little change or like something they can fudge and put in their report at the end of the year. I mean, an actual impact. I really hope it does, but I do not understand for the life of me how. I do not get it. The fact that, and I look at me personally, forget what we should be doing. I look at me personally, I know what I'm like. If I was going for a test and I got to 9 days away from my test and then my instructor said I wasn't ready, I'm not rescheduling that test. I've lost my money anyway. What's the point? I'll just let it go, whatever. Because I think that's the risk we run. And that's me, someone that is at least have an ounce of intelligence. There are a lot of people out there who don't even have the ounce. So I do not get it. I hope I'm wrong. I really, really hope I'm wrong, but it actually annoys me a little bit. Trying to tone down. But just on the DVSA, actually, at the convention, and look, there are people from the DVSA who listen to this podcast. I always get amused when I check my email list and there's the DVSA email on there. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But so, apologies to anyone that's listening, but I thought they were quite poor this year at the DVSA, at the convention. It didn't feel like they had an awful lot of anything of note to say, really.
I think they were, it was disappointing that unfortunately John Sheridan wasn't well, so he couldn't come along because he's got a silver tongue. He could, give you the worst news in the world and you'd thank him for it. He's very good at apologising, but not apologising on behalf of the DVSA, and they're going to miss him. I did drop him a message when they said that he wasn't well, and he said he was incredibly sad not to be there because it was going to kind of be his swan song, because it was the last big event before he was retiring. But he's retired 3 times, so you never know. If you're listening, John, I hope you get well soon and feel better, and I wish you all the best because you've been awesome and so helpful to us. So I think they suffered for John not being there. It wasn't that it felt like they didn't know what they were talking about, but as you said, that they didn't have the content to deliver something meaningful. We've heard the 7-point plan stuff. It wasn't really anything new. Yeah, I think it was very much, we need to fill a bit of time, but maybe there isn't anything. We've had it on the green room where nothing's happened. They're still trying hard. There were some interesting figures in there. I think maybe putting those figures up on the screen might have been a stronger move rather than just saying some numbers, because there were some quite interesting numbers. I think maybe the concern is that if you put them on the screen and we all take photos of them, that they'll come back to haunt people.
Yeah, I've still got the recording of Graham O'Brien, who came on, that said that everything will be sorted by, I think, March 2022 or March 2023. So, yeah. But, no, I get it. And look, I appreciate that me saying this stuff is less likely to make this happen, but I collared one of them after. I don't know why I can't remember the DVSA's name today, but I called one of them after because I was quite annoyed again about the emphasis. So putting on those top 10 reasons people fail. And I'm just saying, look, this isn't why people fail a test. This is the box that you tick. This isn't the reason. There will be people that hear this and see this and think that's what they need to address. And it isn't. Please, can you do something with this? And the answer was kind of no. But I'm like, well, at least we come on and talk about it, so we can put it out there what you're saying, because you get a new PDI in the industry, are they going to listen to this 13-year-old or someone that from the DVSA? They're going to listen to you. So yes, but just while mentioning the convention, I want to give a little shout out to Dr. Ian Greenwood. We didn't mention anyone in particular before when we're talking about it, but I know I was a little bit apprehensive about coming because I think these folks are thinking they're not going to get a good reception from driving instructors because of the reputation that essentially precedes us. But I thought it was awesome, and I thought he was really happy with it. He posted on LinkedIn and stuff like that, saying that he thought such a great bunch of instructors, and he was really positive about his experience there. So yeah, shout out to Dr. Ian Greenwood.
Absolutely.
Let's move on then, and we're going to keep with the theme of the DVSA because they, at the start of the month, released a blog talking about the positive impact that the Ready to Pass is having. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes from this blog, and then I'll let you come back on these as you deem appropriate, Chris. New research shows that learners who are aware of the Ready to Pass campaign are more likely to agree that people should only take their driving test when you, their driving instructor, say they are ready. 85.6% of learners who are aware of the campaign agree people should only take their driving test when their instructor agrees they're ready. For learners who are unaware of the campaign, it's 79% who agree. So 6% more people who are aware of the campaign agree they should be taking the test when their instructor's ready.
Okay. Do you want to comment?
That's my comment. We spoke about Ready to Pass before, And I think me and you were more positive about it than a lot of people.
Yes.
It's still too test focused, but much like the convention, you can't please everyone. It's still too test focused. The top 10 faults go up on there and all this kind of stuff. I actually kind of like it at heart. And it has had one or two of my students that have got messages or that have read it, and they've come back and said to me, I've seen this and this is right. I don't want to take my test if I'm not ready. And they've not waited for it to be a problem or me to raise it. They have raised it. So it does have an impact, but it does feel a little bit like clutching at straws with that, trying to find a reason to justify it.
I really like it. We haven't had anything like that out there before in that kind of, in the way that it's its own standalone site. Yes, it's government, but actually, even aside of that, they're still finding ways to try and, sneak onto TikTok, or which you're not allowed to do, government agencies, issues with China, all that stuff. You mentioned TikTok and everyone rolls their eyes, but it's, they're still trying to find ways to make that happen and engage with the audience. So they are going outside of the norm, which, is just computer says no stuff. There's some really good stuff on there. If you have a look through the different levels of learning that are required against their 27 competency-based syllabus, I think I've got that number right, that, that is an updated version of what I was given when I came into the industry. It was a very instructor-based, but it's got reflection in there, and I think it works really well. It's got to be test focused. It's about putting them off taking the driving test. You can't object to that, because actually, if you then read the other stuff, it says because you're going to want to be safe in the future, and it's in there. It's ready to pass the test. There's the site. I really like it. I don't get the criticism. I think, things like the number of hours, it was an interesting one that came up at the convention, and I've asked on Facebook since and got some mixed reviews from Muppets saying, how long's a piece of string, which is such a helpful comment. If you work out the average of a piece of string, there is one. I get the metaphor. It's a metaphor, isn't it? Yeah. I get the metaphor. Metaphors and similes, never really understood. So I get that metaphor, but you can still get an average if you're measuring them all. So it's about looking at that. And interestingly, the figures, there's so many variables that are coming through about those figures being different. It would be interesting to see if the DVSA figures were the same now, post-COVID, extended waiting list and all the rest of it, to have a better, more up-to-date set of stuff on the website. But actually, it's one thing amongst many. I'm a fan. I've seen them do a lot worse.
Like I said, I do like it, and I do share it with my students as well. But I think they have the right to dislike something, but accept it needs to be there. So the fact that it is about the test, it needs to be about the test, because otherwise students won't look at it. Learn how to drive safe for the rest of your life is going to get a lot less clicks, and are you ready to pass your driving test? So I don't like the fact that has to be there, but I appreciate it needs to be. I have to think of CEO when I'm doing the description for this podcast and stuff. I don't like having to think of CEO. I should just be right whatever title I want, and that goes in. Often I do, but I have to think of that. But I do like it, and I do share it. And I just touched on that last comment you made, and thinking back to the first time I ever spoke to you, which was recording our first episode in 2021. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that phrase minimum standards, and we've spoke about that a lot since. And what they've done with Ready to Pass is they've raised their own minimum standards. And we don't have to adhere to those minimum standards. But the fact that they're raising the minimum standards is going to drag up the people that do adhere to their minimum standards. So yeah, I don't think I'm quite as keen on it as you are, but I definitely approve of it. I definitely think it's a good thing. I think it's had a positive impact. It feels a bit like they're trying to justify it when they don't need to. We know why it's there. You don't have to come out and tell us it's there to reduce the waiting list, but you also don't have to try and convince us it's not, is what I would say.
Yeah, it's showing that we're working hard. The other one that I keep being reminded of at the moment, because I've done a bit of motorway journeys, you know me, sat in my office all day looking at Zoom, but having been out on the motorway a bit, is the National Highways campaign about the blind spots, which I thought was really good on their website, but is even better when it's up on the whacking great billboards at the motorway services and things. So anyone who hasn't seen that, check it out, because that's a nice one for pupils while you're mentioning, government or pseudo-government campaigns.
Last thing I'll tell on this is that the blog post put out is actually quite interesting. There is some interesting stuff on there. I'll try and remember to put a link in the show notes to encourage people to go back and read it. But we're 30 minutes into the show, Chris, so I might have to take a moment to introduce yourself. Do you want to tell everyone who you are, what you do, and where they can find you, all that kind of shizzle?
Yes, I forgot for a sec. I am Chris Benstead, and I am the co-founder of the DITC, the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective, which is the signposting platform for the industry. And personally, I specialise in theory. So if you have any questions, particularly theory ones, please feel free to get in touch. But if you're looking for something, you want to know where it is, I will probably point you to Terry Cook at the Instructor podcast, because he's got lots of good stuff on there. But otherwise, we'll point you elsewhere as well.
The theory, really cheap. Let's try that again. Speaking of the theory, we recently released a bonus episode on the new ADAS theory questions. So is there anything you want to mention on that, Chris, or should we just point people in a direction of that episode?
I did. Go and check it out. Lots of really good feedback at the convention. All I will say to anyone who's worried, because I've had a lot of worried people get in touch, pupils that have looked at the massive change log and gone, help. Most of the changes are don't to do not, or isn't to is not. They show as changes because there's a change to the question, but it's not even in the question or the answer. It's in the summary bit, the understanding and knowledge bit. So people shouldn't worry too much. If you're going to look at anything, check out ADAS, which I've just finished the video. It'll be on my social media if you want something to share.
And if you want to check out that episode, it's the one before this in your podcast feed. And you are listening to the Instructor Podcast Green Room Edition. This is a show where we cover all the latest news and hot topics. And on this feed, there's currently well over 220 episodes. We're heading towards 250, which is quite promising. And if you want any more to do with the Instructor Podcast, go to instructorpodcast.com. Over there, you'll find details on our membership and all the other stuff that I have to offer. And you can also find me at Support Driving School, which I'm co-owner of until Phil and Diana have had enough of me and decide to kick me out, which don't be surprised if that is sooner rather than later, because I tend to have that effect. But yes, if you are considering joining the driving school, there is Support Driving School. But if you want more from me, theinstructorpodcast.com. But I want to move on to something a little bit more delicate. There's been a campaign, there's an ongoing campaign, but it's resurfaced again. I don't think it's something we've ever spoke about on the show before. And it's the campaign essentially for driving instructors to be put on the position of trust. So I'm going to read out something again here. Now, this is from the BBC News website, and I think this explains it really well. So bear with me while I read this out. A position of trust is a legal term associated with roles where adults have a duty of care over a young person, such as in education and social care. Calls for driving instructors to join the list have been going on for years. In 2017, Conservative MP Richard Graham called for instructors to be covered by the same rules as teachers, with then Prime Minister Theresa May saying she would look into the issue. In 2022, the government changed the law and extended the definition to include faith group leaders and sports coaches, but driving instructors were still not included. Fear Free, a charity that supports people affected by domestic abuse, sexual violence and stalking, has launched a campaign called Emergency Stop, which calls for that to be changed. Debbie Beadle, the CEO, said, driving instructors know where you live, they have your phone number, and they're alone with children. So if they want to, it gives them the opportunity to spark up a relationship, take advantage of their position, and groom children. So it's important that we act upon this. So this is quite a sensitive thing, and just as a heads up, I have reached out to Fear Free because it seems very appropriate I speak to them and get them on the podcast to talk about their thoughts on this. But how would you respond to what I've just read out there, Chris?
I don't get why we weren't included on that list in the first place. I suppose slightly, responsive to the fact that it's been raised. it almost feels like we weren't professional enough to be put on the list of potentially professional people that might be unprofessional, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I almost felt like it was a bit of a slight that we weren't. You would almost assume that we are, and everything else. From what I've seen about the interviews and such regarding this, the people that have offered stories and quotes, the horror stories about my driving instructor did this, don't condone any of them. But the stories that were out there, none of them had complained. I think that's more of an issue than because if it's not right, it's not right. That's the thing, isn't it? Is if something is inappropriate, if something is unacceptable, it's irrelevant whether we're on that list or not. The penalty that comes afterwards will be greater if we're on that list, and we work with that specific, I nearly used an incorrect phrase, that specific area of age where they're bridging the adult gap, but are still vulnerable, and we're in a position of authority, and that's why this is such a thing. But if they don't complain, then nothing happens, or it's allowed to continue until something worse happens. So the complaining is the ability to complain is, I think, really important. And I think we need to encourage more of that inside of the industry. The DVSA have said, and I think this is relevant, they have said when people phone up and complain because you're not taking them to test and that sort of complaint, they are backing driving instructors because that's what they want us to do. So I don't think there needs to be this unnecessary worry that just because you've upset a customer, they'll be complaining to DVSA and you'll lose your badge. The DVSA want to clean things up, but they are on our side. They have made it easier for people to complain because you can find the instructor conduct page and this is how you complain about a driving instructor. So that's really good, but people don't tend to complain. They move instructors. I'm really keen on looking more into the whistleblowing side of things, because if you get in touch with the DVSA to complain as a driving instructor, they kind of want you to put your name to it, which isn't always, it was not going to encourage people to do it in a lot of cases because it's often on your doorstep and, it can cause problems. So I think we could do with a better system for complaints, and that doesn't undermine how important this is as a thing. It should be in place. It should always have been in place. But actually, there are other things that I think inside of the industry we should be doing better anyway.
Yeah, I think we've touched around this subject before, but not specifically on this. But I don't think I've told this story before, but it's always something that's stuck with me. And so, 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been pre-COVID. I had a young lady come to me for lessons, and she would tell me about her 2 previous instructors. And she was saying that her first instructor, she left because the instructor was always on the phone while she was driving. A second instructor, she left because he was always making inappropriate comments or sending inappropriate messages along the lines of, well, you've got those buttons undone enough, you might have to undo them some more, and that kind of stuff. Mm. So I'll never forget what she said to me. And this is a bit that sticks. She said, so as long as you don't do anything illegal, and as long as you're not a pervert, you'll be my best instructor yet. And I just remember thinking, that's a really low bar. If that's what people are judging us on, and clearly some people are, that's like horrendous. And look, don't be wrong, I saw the funny side of it. She was saying it in like a playful, jokey way as well. But it's like, if I can't reach that standard, then something's really wrong. But the other aspect, and this does sort of massively tie into what you were saying, I've had people on series before talking sort of specific safeguarding experts, and they're always quite surprised when it's like, well, all I've got to do is a DBS check. There's no training there involved. And when you think of it, in those situations, there should be training there. And the best of us, I shouldn't phrase it that way, but, we go out and get this additional training somewhere, because it's not just to protect them, it's to protect us as well from potentially false accusations or potentially someone doing something to us that when we know how to deal with. Where would you recommend people go if they wanted that training, Chris?
I think it's really difficult. There was a case that I was made aware of where a local instructor had been found guilty of something, and the local instructors were very concerned about how they should protect themselves. Because we bridged that age gap between, the 17-year-olds and then the over 18s, because we bridged that, it's really difficult. There's not support out there. There's not places to go to get advice. There's training available, and there's lots of places that do safeguarding training inside and outside the industry. I think, it's worth having a look at that. A lot of it is common sense stuff, but it's good to sit down and actually look at it as a process and have safeguards in place and to highlight areas of risk. But I think that, there's also this knee-jerk reaction where I need to prove that I'm okay, and that should be the default. As you said, you should be able to achieve that benchmark. It's a really difficult one. I've heard the absolutely unforgivable stories and, cases. I've also heard the ones where there's been a communication breakdown and such. And, I think it's because of the environment that people are in the car and everything else, it's very easy for that to happen. So I think we're all aware of how easy an accusation can then suddenly progress and escalate and, can affect things. One of the other things that I've always struggled with is how, when accusations are made, you're allowed to keep teaching, because of the process. And we know how long that process can take from the DBSA end of things, of the investigations and everything else, which I find difficult, because if you're on the end of an incorrect claim from someone, then you could destroy someone's business that way. We are in a really delicate situation. So I think it is well worth people looking at safeguarding training. Say, I know DIA do it. Neil Whiteman does some. There's plenty of others in the industry that will. Speak to your national associations, because they will be able to point you in the direction of some things. Talk to your local councils, because they will have something in place as well, which will probably be better from a local resources perspective. But expect there to be a little bit of a gap between what's available if you were dealing with younger children, and there are, there's bodies and schemes in place to protect them, where we get to, if you've got, let's make it not about something wrong as such, but if you've got a vulnerable pupil who is saying that something, maybe they're going to go and, try and injure themselves or something like that, that is really hard to find the right place to report it as a concern, because we're not very good in this country at supporting that anyway. So, those things, it's worth looking around to find out what your local offering is, so that in the unfortunate eventuality that you need it, it's available to you. You've got an idea of what to do. And it's a nice way to get in touch with local schools. They can often point you in the right direction because they deal with it themselves. So it might be I hate to suddenly spin that into a business opportunity, but in engaging well with a local school, there might be something that you can raise there. I know we tried to do it locally there was a concern over a local instructor from one of the schools, and we said, well, would you like the list of the ones that we work with? Because working as a group, there's less likely to be someone who's questionable. They tend to be the isolated one. There's opportunities in there to build some beneficial and supportive collaborations. So there can be positive from it as well.
Yes, the other thing I'll chip in with there is I've done a couple of episodes on this, so I'll try and remember to put links to those in the show notes for people to go back and check, including one specifically with Laura Morris, who put up some brilliant thoughts I'd not considered before on that episode, and that was really interesting. But I think I just want to touch back on one thing you said, because you said common sense, and I think that applies a lot of the time, but I think that there's times when, I don't know what phrase I'm looking for. It's not that common sense isn't that common, but it's easy for common sense to slip by. And that's happened to me sometimes. I've spoke about this before, and I can't remember the exact thing, but I can remember having a student who asked me to put my hand on hers to help her change gear. So she specifically asked out, this was an older student in her 30s, it wasn't a 17-year-old. I cannot actually remember if I did or not. But I remember I was training at the time because I went back and asked my trainer, he's like, no, don't do that. And then when he stepped back and think about it, so well, actually, yeah, no, that does make sense. I don't want to be doing that. Not just because of what the student may think, but what someone walking past may think.
Mm.
And so I also think that we need to be a little bit careful when we generalize something as common sense, because looking back now, that's common sense. But in the moment, that's where common sense sometimes slips by the wayside. But I just think that going back to the original point and the point that you made was that, of course, we should be on this list. Of course, there should be training to begin with around this. And as I'm talking about this, I'm now thinking about this with what I'm doing. So it's interesting, and I think it's almost, I might regret saying this, but it's almost to the point where anyone who doesn't think we should be on this list, I'd want to know why. Who doesn't think we should be in this position of trust.
I think a lot of it is fear, because if you give them the stick to beat you with, they might use it. I've worked with people, I've supported people who've had claims going in against them that have been proven not to be true. The DVSA have investigated, and people have got in touch with the DITC and said help. And we've just gone through bit with them, spoken to them about the process, and it all comes clean in the end. The stress of all of that, if you know that consequence is so much more because of the additional legal ramifications of it, I think I can understand where there might be reservations, and sometimes it's from a lack of understanding, and from that side of things. Just as an interesting thought, I think the move from, let's say, instruction to coaching, to polarize it, I know when we were taught to be instructors, there's a glass wall between you and them, and you do not cross it, and everything else. And actually, coaching has softened that space in the middle of the car, not saying that we should be leaning across and touching or anything else, but actually there's that less of that instructor-pupil dynamic. It's much more we're on an even playing field and we're learning together kind of thing. I think that potentially brings more risk along with it for the situations that can occur and can happen. And sometimes we're too close to it. We don't see it as a problem. And as you said, sometimes it's the people walking past. I've had a couple of occasions where I had someone who got really scared on a country road to the point at which she started crying, and a car pulled up alongside us and got us to wind the window down. And I just said, just do me a favour, wind the window down. And then said, I'm going to tell you that she's okay because she can't talk at the minute, but I know that you want to hear it from her. Honestly, there was a tractor. It was a bit of an issue. Give her a second, she'll tell you. And then she looked up, she went, I'm fine, honestly. And it was great. And I said, thank you for stopping, because if it hadn't been, it wasn't that situation. That's brilliant. And another one where we were both sat there crying, and a lady knocked on the window to see if we were okay. We were laughing, and it was inappropriate because the phrase that the pupil used was not the one she meant to use. At which point we'd creased up, and this tiny little old lady knocked on the window. She nearly couldn't. She was that small. She nearly couldn't knock on the window, but knocked on the window to check that everything was all right. And we were both sat there with tears streaming down our faces. So I think the public perception is there. That probably highlights a negative. So let's see it as a way to make ourselves look more professional.
I think you're right. And I think that's a good point about the culture aspect as well. Because you think about what we talk about now, it's the thoughts and feelings. That's opening up a whole other can of worms. But yeah, do you know what? I'm going to tell a brief one. I had a student not that long ago turned up and she smelled like she'd been smoking something she shouldn't have been smoking. Now, she explained to me that it's the person she lived with and it's sort of secondhand smoke. And I actually believed her, just because of the interaction with her previously. I'm like, well, we can't do a lesson. I can't, as much as I believe you, I can't let you drive my car like this. And she, well, can we sit aside the road and do a theory lesson? And at first I thought, actually, that's not a bad idea. Then I thought, no, because you're going to make my car stink. And anyone walking past that sees the instructor car there, just smelling a weed, that don't look good. And I was actually surprised at myself that I thought of that, because that's usually a common sense thing that would go over my head. But yeah, I think I'm going to try and get, what were they called, fear-free on the podcast. I reached out just today, admittedly. But that could make for an interesting conversation, see what they've got to say. But yeah, anyone that's got concerns, I think you mentioned it, Chris, but Neil Whiteman does a lot of stuff around safeguarding. DIA, I think, regularly do different courses on there. But it might be at the minute where you're going more external. But as I said, I'll try and find the links to the episodes and include them in the show notes. But I think this kind of ties us into the next point, because it was a message I received from one of my premium members, Dave Legg, who's, in a nice way, my biggest critic. I've said that before. I love how he responds to my stuff. And he was talking about driving instructors and customer care. And the sort of specific example he used was binning learners. And when we'll see someone say, oh, someone no-showed, or someone did this, whatever, and we get all those comments, bin them, bin them, bin them, bin them. Now, I mentioned this to you before we started recording, and your sort of initial response was, I hate that phrase. And so do I. So do I. Why do you hate that phrase?
Oh, I nearly swore. I never swear on this. It's fill in the blank disrespectful. They don't have to come to you. They've given you their money. They've given you their trust. And for some reason, it hasn't worked. And it that could well be down to your communication, not theirs. That you didn't, lay the table, to steal your phrase, didn't lay the table properly and say, this is how it's going to work and this is what it's going to be. You didn't step in when it started going wrong, or all of those things. It could be that they're just a nightmare of a person and that's how they are in their life and everything else. I just think it's disrespectful. And fine, if it's not working for you, you don't have to teach anyone. It's okay to say no. So say no, say it's not working right now, and part professionally. You don't have to part as friends, part professionally. I hate the bin'em phrase. I just, it absolutely grates on me, to the point at which I can't engage with posts that have got people saying bin'em. I also think you can often turn it around. That we know that the industry is word of mouth. The main referrals that you will get are word of mouth referrals. That person you're binning is the opposite of a referral. They will be telling people not to come to you if you handle it badly. So don't. Handle it professionally and just say, I don't think this is working well. Here's a better option. This is what I think you should do. I'm not willing to take your money while you're not committed to the process. Whatever it might be, do that. It doesn't mean they have to like it, but at least they can't come back and go, this is what they told me. It's the same as when a pupil sends a message at 2 a.m, or an inquiry at 2 a.m, or whatever it is, and people reply in a negative way. Or the other one I've never understood, where they said, oh, because you've been busy, I've booked a couple of lessons with this other instructor who was available, so I'm going to do both the lessons. No, you're not. I don't share pupils. You don't get a choice. Honestly, it's up to them. They're the customer. So, you might not like it, but that might say more about you than them. Can I get off my soapbox now?
Yeah, because I'm going to step on mine. But, all those points I agree. It's one of the things I genuinely speak about on the first lesson. You have my number. Do not be afraid to use it. I don't care when you text me. If you text me at 2 a.m, that's completely fine. You just can't complain when I reply at 6 a.m. when I get up. It's kind of works both ways in that sense, but it goes back to what you said. It's disrespectful. I also think it's borderline unprofessional. I think that I spoke with Tom Stenson. I recorded with Tom recently for the premium membership, I think it was. And I was telling a story in there about how I'd let a lad go. I didn't bin him. I let him go because I couldn't provide him with what he wanted. Because he wanted like a fast pass type of thing. I'm like, I'm not the guy for you. I'm sorry, but I'm not. And off he trots. And then a little while later, he sent me one of his friends because he told his friend, this is the instructor you want. Because his friend didn't want the same type of lessons that he did. If I'd have binned him in that unceremonious manner, I wouldn't have got that other student sent through. So I just think it's uncalled for. I really do. And yeah, we can throw a tantrum all we want and say, yeah, but this person no-showed once, or yeah, but whatever it is, it's, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it why someone causes you a problem that then causes a meltdown. I would understand it if it was an ongoing thing, and there are times, I'm sure, when I would say, all right, you screwed me over 5 times, now I'm binning them. You get annoyed for 5 minutes and you might even phrase it that way, but then you calm down, you go, well, actually, I'm a professional human. I'm going to speak to them. I'm going to tell them I can't work anymore. And I think there's a massive difference between doing that and just picking someone out.
Yes. But if it's got to that point, you probably should have done something about it sooner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely.
It's that, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking over you because I'm on my soapbox now. But there was 2 people last year, and again, I spoke about this in my premium membership because it bothered me. There were 2 people last year I let go because they were not my students. They were not people that come to me for lessons. And it was all because I didn't filter them properly. I wasn't doing my marketing properly. So people that wouldn't normally come to me for lessons, they come to me for lessons, and they were no-showing, they were messing me about, they caused me all kinds of problems. And when I step back and look at it, it was all my doing. It was all my doing. I wasn't putting my social media out saying this is what I expect. I wasn't having those conversations with them early on. I wasn't setting my boundaries. I would I'd gone slack for a little while. And as a result, I'd got people I didn't enjoy working with that were messing me about. That was my fault because I'd not nipped it in the bud. So in the end, I had to do what I had to do, and I had to let them go. But it was all respectful, and it was pleasant, and no one fell out. And I think that's the thing. And do you know what? I'm going to use a phrase now. Oh, the snowflake. It's that thing we see all the time talking about youngsters and this generation or whatever, and them all being snowflakes. But then you see instructors online kicking off about this stuff, and I think, who's actually a snowflake?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is. I think it's easier to throw the stones, isn't it? So, yeah. No, I hate it. Absolutely hate it. I don't like the attitude. I've had nightmare pupils. It's not all, roses, but as you said, a lot of them, I haven't helped the situation. Or I've let it happen in the first place when I've taken them on knowing it's going to be a problem. I've learnt to say no.
Yes, I get that because I filter my students a lot more over the last few years. Because obviously demand increases, so you get more inquiries, and it's like, no, I'm going to pick who I want to work with. But I've always done that ever since I left Red Driving School. And I've told this before, but when I was with Red, I used to get on with my students. I didn't really dislike anyone, but when I went independent, I loved my students. There was a shift. And the difference is they were choosing me, not the company. It chose Red, and then Red sent them to me. And there's nothing wrong with that, just to clarify. You run a driving school, you'll send students to your instructor sometimes. So there's nothing wrong with that. But when I went independent, they were choosing me. And I think that makes a big difference.
That's what we've done differently with our driving school is that actually, if you look at social media, it's much less common for our driving school to be recommended. Our instructors get recommended because that's what we wanted to build when we created it. And I think that is the thing that I always say to people that are on with big franchises, how are you going to stand out? You don't want to be the AA Red BSM instructor because there's lots of them. So how, if that works for you, being with a franchise, being under a name, whatever it is, absolutely. But you want to be a person, an individual, so that people know it. The number of people that come to my theory training and they don't know their instructor's name. And there's 2 types. I get the ones that are referred by the instructor who know their instructor really well and they know them by name and they're referred to them while we're chatting. And you get the ones that have found me, or their parents have found me because they're struggling. They don't know their instructor's name. I've never had a pupil not know my name. I don't understand it. I really struggle with that concept. To the point at which they will remember, even if they learnt 10, 15 years ago now, they will know me and I still hear from them every now and again. And that is what I want to be as an instructor. I don't want to be an instructor. I want to be the person that was part of their life and their journey because I enjoy that. That sounded egotistical, but it's not totally.
sounded just all. It sounded like what you want to achieve. And Joe, I'm going to put myself on the spot a little bit. No, I put myself in the firing line here, Chris. I've sent you a handful of students for the theory.
Yes.
What did they talk about me?
I'm not going to say what they said, but they knew who you were. No,
I'll say that.
They genuinely loved you. They all said how great you are. Because tongue in cheek, I will, poke at fun at the practical instructor because of the division between practical and theory. I do it very carefully because I did get someone phone me up and complain the other day. You told my pupil I was teaching wrongly. I was like, let me explain. And it wasn't. It was just trying to highlight the difference between what you get told in the car and what the theory needs. For example, if you're being followed by a car that's too close, most instructors will say, don't worry about them, focus on what you're doing. And that's a wrong answer on the theory test. The answer is make more space in front of you to make up for the lack of space behind you. So yeah, I'll often kind of, poke a bit of fun. I love it when, like your pupils, they are defensive. They want to protect their instructor because they've got an instructor that they respect. And I love that. I think that really shows that they're listening, because what that means is they're going to be safer in the future because they trust what you're telling them. They trust the opinion you have. We need some of that because otherwise you're telling them what to do to pass that test. And then afterwards they're going to forget what you said and they're going to do what their dad told them or what their mate does or whatever it is. We need to have that little bit of authority in there. And that doesn't have to be authoritarian.
I appreciate that. And whilst I should be taking positive from that, what I'm hearing is if they're getting defensive, you must be attacking me. So, whatever. There was an occasion, was when I was read, and again, no sight on red, but when I was with red, there was a time that clicked for me, a very specific time, and I realised I need to start getting my own students. And it was a lesson where we were pulled up outside the road, and a robin sat on the mirror next to me. And I'm like, look, there's a robin right there. Look at it. It's right there. And he's like, oh, you whatever. Can we crack on? I'm like, I don't want to teach you anymore. You're not excited by the fact there's a robin on my mirror. I was tempted to kick him out. And I'm like, I need to mark it for people that want robins to come and sit on the mirror. I do want to touch back into one comment that we've had. I'm not going to say who it's from, just in case people are listening potentially that will realise that we've never talking about them. But you think there's a lot of these about, and it's WhatsApp groups with naughty lists. And not just WhatsApp groups, even on Facebook as well, where, don't take on this person. I must admit, I have been known that when I see in my local area, do not take on this person, I have been known to reach out to that person and offer them lessons. And they've always been awesome when they've happened, because I always think there's two sides to every story. And even with me, I've said about the students I had let go, I bet they didn't like me. And I bet that they're going to get on better with their next instructor because they didn't get on well with me. So when I get someone that's come from another instructor, it's not necessarily always a slight on that instructor. But if they didn't get on with that instructor, they get more chance of getting on with me because they're coming in looking at it slightly differently. Again, I just need to not be a pervert and not do anything illegal. And that's all I need to do to be better than some people. So, yeah.
Yes. I run 20 or so WhatsApp groups across the local area because we've got one per test centre plus a few specialist type things. And a test swap group because you need one of those nowadays. And the rule is no people details. Partly GDPR. It's a whacking great fine. You don't want to be doing that. And I see it as a way of protecting the instructors from saying something they shouldn't and causing themselves a problem, because we don't always think outside of typing it, do we? But it is something I've never liked because, as you said, there's circumstances behind it. And you never know who knows who. It's the 6 degrees of separation. Yeah, which is something that always fascinates me. It's not worth upsetting people.
Seeing that bloke on TikTok who keeps finding everyone's connection to Kevin Bacon.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to touch on around this topic?
No, I think we've soapboxed it to death.
I don't know. I think there's an awful lot more we can complain about, but we don't want to. Let's finish on a positive note. What's positive at the minute, Chris?
Help. And this is when I then go, are you trying to get me to say something specific that maybe you mentioned earlier?
No,
I'm supposed to have
I'm really not. We've just been talking about negative stuff. I want something positive.
just want something positive. I'm struggling now. Nothing that's of interest to the people listening. I've got lots of really cool stuff. My daughter's now able to kind of get herself up and start smiling at me in the morning. That is, if anyone wants to see something positive, that brightens your day. You know, I'll take that. She's 8.5 months old, and she's awesome. So for me, I'll go with that. You can throw all the negativity you like at me. I get to go home and get smiled at. It's all good. She'll learn.
I live alone, so thanks for bringing that in.
I'll send you a picture. It's fine.
I must admit, actually, one of my highlights from the weekend with the convention was when I got home and I saw you'd post a picture of you and your daughter. And you were like, I've had an awesome weekend, but coming on to this, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was that sort of thing. I just thought, that's really nice. We don't see enough of that on social media. But in terms of positivity, I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the stuff that's coming up. So in May is the Scotland ADI NJC conference. I nearly went up there last weekend by mistake instead of Milton Keynes, which would have been interesting. Then we've got the Expo in September. We've also got, as we mentioned, the 50th episode of the Instructor Podcast Green Room in April. And in July, we've got the Instructor Meganar, 9 guests, or well, potentially 10 actually, because I may have overbooked. But 9 guests are all delivering 20-minute presentations. So get tuned in for that. But for now, do you want to take a moment to remind people who you are and where they can find you?
Chris Benstead, dad, magician, and theory specialist, and I co-run the DITC for all of your driving instructor needs. So if you need anything about theory, if you need anything that you can't find elsewhere, get in touch, and I will happily point you in the right direction.
What are you better at, being a dad, a magician, or a theory test specialist? In fact, rank them.
I love magic, absolutely love it, but I'm not good at it. It's like everything, same as musical instruments. I like knowing how it's done, and in that ruins magic to some extent. We saw you were directly involved with the Mentalist at the gala event before the convention. I was bored to tears because I just sat there knowing how it was done, and you were loving it, and it was great. So I miss some of that. So my advice is don't get into magic because it ruins the magic in some ways. So I am a very amateur magician. I can do a couple of tricks really well. One that I showed Tom Stenson, and you weren't there, so I need to show you at some point. We'll find out how good I am as a dad as to whether she ends up, incarcerated or not. We'll wait and find out. I've had 2, practice projects. One's 14 and one's 8. So, both of those are doing all right, I think. But this one's a different gender. It's a different world. So I'm waiting to figure that one out. And was the other one my theory? Was that the number 3? I think I'm really good at that. I'm a massive geek. And that's what the theory is all about. I get to geek out and I get to be silly and come up with things that to no one else will make sense. But it means they stick in people's heads and they remember it. So I think I was built for doing that. The other stuff I just kind of muddle through.
We're going theory, dad, magician.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have to wait 10 years to find out about that.
Right? Yeah. But the dad might go up or down depending on my success. But it's a long-term project, isn't it? I don't really do long-term.
You said I was having a whale of a time with that Mentalist. If I give that impression, that's clearly a good thing because I wasn't. At the start of this year, started learning to juggle.
Oh, cool.
And I can currently juggle one ball, but I can juggle one ball almost reasonably well now. Whereas at the start of the year, I could not juggle one ball.
I can juggle balls. I'm not very good with clubs, but I had fire clubs. That's a good way to learn clubs. Like one end of them. Fire balls, not as much fun. And I can spin plates as well. I had a weird you.
Well, I knew that as soon as I gave myself one little positive, you would just essentially piss all over it. So, it's fine. But yes, hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you're listening, that last little ramble was specifically for one person who we know enjoys these shows, but will be listening to this. So yeah, big thank you for listening. If you want more, you can check out the instructorpodcast.com. But for now, let's just keep raising those minimum standards.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.